Welcome back to a new week. It's week 3, and this week we are going to be finishing off our central egg panel. So we'll be filling in and working some more rounds of our lovely cornflower base to bring that to its completion, and we'll also be working on 2 more egg designs. So this week we're stepping up our skills again, and we've got 2 eggs for you. We have a lovely egg with bows on, which are a little bit of a trust the process one. They look really strange when you first start them, but as you'll see in our step-by-step video next, work through it with me step by step, and all of a sudden they become perfect bows. So you'll see that as we work through. We also have my personal favorite, the checkerboard egg, which is a little bit of an introduction to tapestry crochet and carrying yarn, but is very impactful in our 4 different colorways as we make them up and put them around our blanket. So those are our main techniques and skills we're going to be working through together this week. Let's hop to it. We're going to begin round 1 of this week, exactly where we left off from the previous week. So if you did use a little stitch marker to hold your loop to stop it unraveling, then take it out now. And we should find ourselves on a right side row, and we're going to begin by working down our long edge. So we will want to make 1 slip stitch into our corner to begin. And we're going to start with a chain 3. We're going to work another treble into that corner. And then very, very similarly to how we left off last week, we're going to be making 1 treble in each stitch along until you hit the corner. So essentially, we're continuing our base. We're bringing it out another 8 rounds. And rather than bore you by making you watch me make trebles on camera, I'm going to leave you to carry on these rounds because we know what we're doing. It's very similar to what we did last week. We're just building up our base. Making sure that at each corner you're working 2 treble, chain 2, 2 treble. And we are increasing by 16 stitches each round. So do keep an eye on your stitches. Obviously our work is getting bigger now and we've got more counting to do. So if you are finding that you're losing track as you're counting your stitches or your rounds, a tip I have is to use a couple of your stitch markers. And every 20 stitches or every 50 stitches as you're counting along one edge, if you pop a stitch marker in, then it just helps. If you're like me and you lose count easily, you can then go back and count in sort of 20s or 50s just to check. You don't need to do that every round. And just assuming that we're increasing correctly at our corners and we're always working 4 stitches into the corners, we should be fine. But it's just a note because by the end of round 8 for this week, we're going to want to make sure we have the correct amount of stitches because that will set us up for the next week. So go ahead and work rounds 1 to 8 for this week. I will join you back here and show you how mine is looking at the end of 8 rounds, and we can chat about the next stages. Once you have reached the end of round 8, your work should hopefully be looking a little something like this. We have now worked our previous week and then our current week on top of the previous one to give it this really lovely big blue section, which is going to be our base that we're shortly going to attach all of our eggs to. So you can go ahead now and fasten off your cornflower yarn because we won't be needing that again. So I've already slip stitched, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull my yarn all the way through and fasten off. You can weave in this end as well now. For our first egg this week, our bow egg, I'm going to be using our flame colour as our main colour, and then our pink as the contrast colour. So that is the paler pink in your pack. We're going to begin with flame, and we're going to start with a chain of 9. So with your main colour, chain 9. We're then going to start in the 4th chain from the hook, and we're going to be making a treble. So we never count the chain on our hook. We want to count back 1, 2, 3, 4 chains from our hook. So it's this one here that we want to work into. Yarning over for your treble and going into that 4th chain from the hook. Going to make a treble in that stitch. And our missed chain 3 here also counts as a stitch, as it did for our eggs last week. We're then going to work 4 treble, 1 into each of the next 4 chains. Which should leave us with 1 chain left, into which we want to make 2 trebles. So by the end of row 1, and this is a right side row, we should have 8 stitches. Turn your work, and then for row 2, we're going to begin with a chain 3. We then want to make 1 treble in the same stitch. 2 treble in the next stitch. And then 4 trebles across the middle of our egg. That should leave us with 2 stitches left to work into, and we're going to work 2 treble in each of those. So 2 trebles in the next. And 2 treble in the final stitch. So at the end of row 2, we should have 12 stitches. For row 3, we're again going to start with a chain 3 and a treble in the same stitch. 2 treble in the next stitch. Then 8 treble across the middle of your egg. That leaves us with 2 stitches left to work into, and we're going to increase in both of those. So we're going to work 2 trebles in the next one. And 2 treble in the final one. So by the end of row 3, we've done all of our increases, and we should now have 16 stitches. For row 4, we're going to turn our work and chain 3. And we're then simply going to make 15 treble across. But on the very last treble, we are going to change colour to our contrast colour. So as a reminder, when we change colour, we always want to do it on the final yarn over of the stitch before we need to work the colour itself. So on the very last treble of this row, on the final yarn over of that stitch, we will change colour. And I did recommend this last week, but if you are having trouble identifying the first and the last stitch of your rows when we're increasing and decreasing on the eggs, don't forget you can use your stitch markers to help you keep a track of that. So I'm at the last stitch of the row now. I'm going to yarn over and insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. But instead of yarning over and pulling through that final part with our main colour, we're going to bring in our contrast colour. Remember to leave yourself a little tail end so that we've got enough when we come to weaving in our yarn later. So we're going to turn our work here. And this is a right side row that we are on here. So we're using our contrast colour. It's now on the hook. We're going to leave our main colour attached and hanging down on the wrong side of the work. We're going to chain 1, which counts here as 1 double crochet. We then want to work 2 double crochet. So we're switching stitches. We don't need to yarn over for our double crochet. Instead, we're going to go straight into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And then we're going to work 1 double crochet in the next one as well. We're now going to make our bow, and this is a little bit of a trust the process one because it looks really strange when we set it up in row 1, but when we come back and work row 2, it suddenly cinches the bow together and everything makes sense. So if you're making it and it looks odd, that is part of the process. We're going to work through it slowly together and you'll probably see what I mean. So we're going to start with a chain of 6 here. So we're just going to go straight up and then we're going to come back down and work down the chain. At this point, we're not working into our egg, we're just going to chain. So chain of 6, I've done 1. Once you've got that chain of 6, we're going to begin in the second chain from the hook. So we never count the loop on our hook. This is the first, this is the second. And we're going to be making double crochets, so we don't need to yarn over first. So instead, we're going to insert into that second chain from the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. So that is 1 double crochet, and we want to make 4 of those in total. So we're going to go into the next chain and make a second double crochet and a third, and in that chain there, a 4th. So what we've made there is our little tie for our bow, and we need 2 of those, so we're going to do the same thing again. And if you take a look at your pattern, you'll see that those instructions we just made are in brackets, and afterwards it says times 2. And that indicates to us that we need to repeat that again. So we're going to go back to the start of the brackets and follow the instructions again. We're going to chain 6. So again, we're not working into our egg, we're just going straight up the chain, and then we're going to come back down that little chain. We're going to start in the second chain from the hook, so not counting the one on the hook, skipping the first one. And we're going to work 4 double crochet back down that chain. So you can see where we've repeated it. I'll put it flat. Almost looks like 2 little flags that we've made there. That is going to be the little ties of our bow. We're now going to do an even longer chain. So we've repeated those instructions in brackets twice. We now want to make a chain of 21. So again, at this stage, we're not working into our egg, we're just going up in a chain. So once you have your chain of 21, we're now going to work the next stitches back down this chain. So we've got a series of stitches here that are all slightly different heights, and that's what's going to create our bow shape when we're finished. So starting in the second chain from the hook again, don't count the one here. This is the first one. We're first going to make 1 double crochet, so just like we were doing. We're then going to work 2 half trebles. So yarning over for a half treble and then pulling through all of those loops. We want 2 of those. We're then going to work 4 trebles. So trebles like we were doing when we made our egg, we're going to yarn over, pull through 2 and pull through 2. So that's 1, 2 treble, 3, and 4. We then want 2 half treble, working back down the chain, then 2 double crochet. So we've sort of worked half of our chain here. We can now start increasing the height of our stitches. Just working 1 in each chain, we now want to work 2 half trebles, 4 trebles, two half treble, and then you should find that you have 1 chain left to work into, and we're going to work 1 double crochet. So I'm going to put that flat for you just so you can see a little bit better what I've made. We came up and made our 2 little ties for our bow, and then we've made here our sort of bow section. So the last thing we need to do before we can go back down and carry on working in our row is we're going to bring over the end of the large chain here. We're going to bring it over and we're going to bring it over the front. Insert our hook into the first double crochet we made, so the first stitch there, and then we're going to slip stitch. So we're going to yarn over and slip stitch. So we've created this big loop on the front of our work. And as I said, this is what I mean about it being a trust the process thing, because it just looks weird at this stage. It doesn't look like a bow yet. We're now going to come back down and work into our stitches here. We're going to skip 2 of them. So you can see here is where we last worked into our egg in our flame colour. We're going to skip the next 2 trebles, and so we're going to start in this one here. And then we want to work 11 double crochet, which should take us to the end of the row. So we're just going to go straight back in. Don't worry too much about what your bow looks like or is doing. We're working 11 double crochets back down. So here is what our piece is looking like at the end of that row. It looks a little bit odd and a little bit strange. But what we're going to do on our next row is we're going to come back along, and into those 2 stitches that we missed, we're going to work a stitch over the top of this, which is going to cinch our bow in, and it's all going to make sense. So turn your work, and then for this row we're using half trebles. So we're going to chain 2, which counts as 1 half treble for our first stitch. Then we're going to make 10 half trebles, just working directly into the row below, yarning over, inserting, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all of those stitches. So those 10 half treble will bring us all the way up to the bow. We're then going to make 2 half treble into these stitches that we missed. But in doing so, we're going to work over the top of this bow here. So we're on our wrong side here. We're going to yarn over, and I'm going to insert into the treble stitch underneath in flame. If we turn our work over here, what you want to do is you want your stitch to kind of peek between the 2 little ties of our bow, and we're all going to work over the top of the bow. So we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and it's going to pull up to the wrong side. We're then going to yarn over and pull through. Yarn over and then pull through to complete your treble. We then want to make 1 more treble. So here's what it's looking like at this point on the back, and then here's what it's looking like on the front. So you can see how it has worked over the top of that big loop we made, and it's starting to look a lot more like a bow. So let me show you that again with the second treble. We're going to yarn over, we're going to insert into that unworked treble from the row below in our main colour, and our hook will come out. We want it to be in between the little ties, and we're going to yarn over, and in doing so we're working over the top of the bow that we made. You can then yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So that's what it looks like from the wrong side, and this is what it looks like on the other side. So as you can see, my bow's a bit wonky, but because we made it in a loop, we can just pull and adjust to make it look a bit prettier like a bow. So we have got a couple more stitches here left to work of our row. So after those 2 trebles, we then want to work 3 half trebles. So those are going to be into the double crochet stitches of our contrast colour. We don't need to worry about working over the top of our bow anymore. We're just working into those stitches on the ends of the row, and we're working 3 half trebles. That's 1, and then 2, and then the third one we're working into the chain 1 that was acting as a double crochet from the previous row. On that final half treble, we're going to also change back to our main colour. So you can at this point cut your contrast colour, leaving a tail end. And we left our main colour, if you recall, attached on the back of our work, so it's here and ready for us to yarn over and pull through the final yarn over of that half treble to complete the stitch and also set us up with our main colour back on our hook for the next row. So here's what it's looking like after we've worked those stitches. We worked half trebles along, then we worked 2 trebles over the top of our loop and our bow, and then we worked half trebles again back to the end of the row. So there's our really cute little crochet as you go bow sitting now on the front or the right side of our work. So for rows 7 to 8, we're doing some simple treble rows again. We're going to begin with a chain 3, and then you're going to work 15 trebles before turning. So that's 1 treble in each stitch across. When you get to working into the top of your bow, your stitches should just look like normal stitches. We're not having to work into the loop on the front or anything, just working a treble straight into the top of the stitch below. So go ahead and complete rows 7 to 8, which are simple 1 treble in each stitch in our main colour. And I will meet you back here in the video at the start of row 9, where we're going to make a second bow. The only thing to note is that at the end of row 8, we will need to change colour again to our contrast colour. So I'll meet you back for that part. You join me back here at the very end of row 8. I'm just working my final treble, and I'm also going to change colour on the final yarn over to our contrast colour. So pulling through on that final yarn over, leaving ourselves a little tail end. And just like we did on our previous bow row, we're going to leave our main colour attached on the back of our work. So using our contrast colour for row 9, we're going to begin with a chain 1, which counts as a double crochet. We're then going to work 10 double crochet. And now we're going to make another bow. So let's work through it again together. We're going to begin with a chain of 6. Then starting in the second chain from the hook, we're going to work 4 double crochet back down that chain. So not working into our egg, but starting in the second chain from the hook, we're going to work 4 double crochets. So no yarning over before our double crochet. And looking at our pattern together, we've got those instructions in brackets with a ×2. So just like on our first bow, we need to repeat that again. So we're going to chain 6. We're going to start in the second chain from the hook and work 4 double crochets. So that's our 2 little bow ties. We're then going to work our chain of 21. So just take your time to count your chain. Once you've got your chain of 21, we're going to work those stitches back down the chain, just like we did for our first bow. We're going to start in the second chain from the hook, so we don't count the one on the hook. That's the first one, here's our second one. And we're going to begin with 1 double crochet. And then we're back into varying our stitches. So we want 2 half trebles, yarning over first, then putting through all of the loops. Then 4 trebles, so yarning over and pulling through 2 and pulling through 2. We want 4 of those. 2 half trebles, then 2 double crochets. So here's how it's looking so far. We're now going to increase the height of our stitches again. We're going to work 2 half trebles, four trebles, two half trebles, and then we should have one chain of our 21 chains left to work into, and we're going to work a double crochet. So again, here's what mine is looking like at this point. We've got our 2 little tie ends and then our kind of bow tie looking section here. So to complete and to turn our bow into a loop, we want to bring that back round, and we're going to slip stitch into the first double crochet that we made. So inserting your hook, then going to yarn over and pull through all the stitches in order to slip stitch. And again, this is the point at which everything looks a bit weird, but we're gonna trust the process. We're gonna skip 2 trebles from the egg underneath, and then we're going to work our final stitches into the 3 stitches that are left. So we want to work 3 double crochet. So just taking your hook, skipping those 2 stitches and going into the next one, we're going to work 3 double crochet in the last 3 stitches of our row. You can then turn your work for row 10, and we're going to switch to half trebles for the majority of this row. We're going to start with a chain of 2, which counts as 1 half treble. We're then going to make 2 half trebles, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. That then brings us up to our bow section. So we're going to make 2 trebles into these unworked stitches here. And in doing so, as you remember we did with the last one, we're going to work over the top of the bow. So first of all, begin by yarning over and inserting your hook into the unworked stitch of flame, and then just have a look at the front of your work. We want our hook to kind of poke up in between the 2 bow ties there, and then we're going to bring our yarn over the top in order to yarn over. We're then going to pull up a loop to the front of our work, yarn over and pull through 2 only for a treble, yarn over and pull through 2. So we've worked over the top of that loop. I'm going to do the same thing again for the next stitch. Yarn over, insert your hook into the unworked treble, make sure it's in between the 2 little bow ties, yarn over and pull up a loop. And you might want to exaggerate the loop a little bit, just so you're bringing it up to the same height. Yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2 for your second treble. So here's what it looks like on the back. And then here's what it looks like on the right side of our work. We've worked those 2 trebles over the top of our bow. And if you need to adjust it, move it around a little bit there, you can. So now that we've worked over our bow, we want to work half trebles for the rest of the row, and we're working 11 half trebles, working now into our contrast colour stitches. Those 11 half trebles will take us to the end of our row. Just make sure that you're not missing that last stitch of the round, because it was a little chain 1 which counted as a double crochet. So you should have 16 stitches in total. I've made a mistake because I was too busy talking. We don't want to miss that last double crochet, but we also want to change colour on the last stitch of the row. So let's work through that together again. We've got 1 half treble left to make. We want to work it into that last stitch of the row. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Rather than yarning over with the pink, we're going to yarn over with our main colour, which we left attached, so that we now have it ready and set up. That's all of our contrast colour that we're using for this egg. So you can now cut your yarn, leaving a tail end to weave in later. And we can complete the rest of our egg with our main colour, which is flame for us in this sample. So row 11 is exactly what we did after our last bow row. We're simply working 1 treble in each stitch along. So we've got a chain 3 to begin, which counts as a treble, and then we're working 15 treble to the end of the row. So here's how our egg is looking up to this point. We're now going to start decreasing for the top. So turn your work and chain 1, which doesn't count as a stitch here for the first time. We're then going to work 1 treble 2 together over the first 2 stitches. So we're yarning over, inserting into the first one, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, then yarning over and going into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. We can then yarn over and pull through all of our loops to decrease for our treble 2 together. After that, we want to work 12 stitches, 12 trebles specifically, across the middle of our egg, which will leave us with 2 stitches into which we're going to work 1 more treble 2 together to decrease. So on the final 2 stitches, we're working a treble 2 together to decrease. Turn your work, and then for row 13, we're going to chain 1, which doesn't count as a stitch. We're going to work a treble 2 together across the first 2 stitches, and then 10 trebles across the middle of your egg. That should leave you with 2 stitches left. We're going to make a treble 2 together across those final 2 stitches. We can then turn, and for row 14 we're again going to start with a chain 1. We're then going to work 2 treble 2 togethers. So 1 across the first 2 stitches and a second across the next 2 stitches. 4 treble across the middle. And then we should have 4 stitches left of our row. We're going to work 2 more treble 2 togethers. We can now turn, and for our final row, again we're going to chain 1, which doesn't count as a stitch, and we're going to work 4 treble 2 togethers over the final 8 stitches. So 4 decreases to complete our row. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. That is us all finished up for our bow egg as well. So you can now fasten off with a slip stitch, cut your yarn, leaving a tail end long enough to weave in, and then just pull that all the way through to secure. So that last row, row 15, should have a stitch count of 4 stitches. For our final egg, which is our checkerboard egg, we're going to be using the 4th colour combination. So for our main colour, we're using our pink yarn again. And for the contrast colour, we are using grass. So technique-wise, this egg is a little bit different from the other ones because we're going to be using tapestry crochet throughout and always carrying our yarn that we're not currently using. So let's work through that together. We're going to begin with a chain of 9. So create a slip knot on your hook, and then with your main colour, we're going to chain 9. And at this point, we are going to bring in our contrast colour yarn to carry. And we've done a little bit of this already in the blanket at different points. But essentially, we're going to hold it for now. And we're going to hold it alongside our chain so that when we come to work into our chain, we're also working over the top of our contrast colour and encasing it inside our stitches. So it's a little bit fiddly to set up, but then once it's there, we can just chop and change between the 2 yarns as we need them. So we're going to begin with a treble in our main colour in the 4th chain from the hook. So we're going to yarn over for our treble. We don't count the loop on the hook, so we're looking for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th treble here from the hook. 4th chain, sorry, we're going to make our treble into it. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. But before yarning over and finishing off that colour, we're going to immediately change colour to our contrast colour. So we're going to yarn over with our contrast colour and pull through to complete. And because we've switched colours, we're also now going to switch which yarn we're carrying. So we want to make 4 trebles now in our contrast colour. So we're going to yarn over and make 4 trebles along our chain, making sure we also work over the top of our main colour to carry it. And again, just like always when we want to change colour, we're going to do it on the final yarn over of the stitch before we need it. So on this 4th treble in our contrast colour, we're going to do the yarn over and pull through 2, and then for the final yarn over, we are going to drop that colour and pick up our main colour again. Yarn over and pull through 2. So with our main colour back on our hook, we are now going to work 2 trebles in our final chain. And we're going to change colour again on the final yarn over of that 2nd stitch. So at the end of row 1, we've got 2 trebles in our main colour, 4 in our contrast colour and 2 in our main colour, and then we've got our contrast colour back on our hook ready to start the next row. This is our right side, I should also add. So when we're turning here, and this is our wrong side, this is where we're going to want to keep our tail ends, and also when we turn, we will see ever so little bit of our stitches. So if we always aim to keep that on the wrong side, it keeps things a little bit neater. We also won't see our wrong side when our egg is attached to the work. For row 2, we're going to start with a chain 3 in our contrast colour. We're then going to make 1 treble in our contrast colour back into that same stitch. And as we do so, we want to also now go back to carrying the yarn we're not currently using. We also want to now make 2 trebles in our contrast colour in the next stitch. And we're going to change back to our main colour on the final yarn over of that 2nd one. So because I'm on a wrong side row, I'm just going to bring my yarns to the front as I change. And then remember to carry the one that we're not currently working with. We're now going to work 4 trebles in our main colour. Changing back to our contrast colour on the last yarn over. And then in the final 2 stitches, we want to work 2 trebles in our contrast colour. So 2 in the next stitch, remembering to carry our yarn, and 2 in the final stitch. And we are going to change colour on that final yarn over. Now when we turn, I'll just show you this once. If we were to turn this way, we'd be pulling our little tail ends there onto the front of our work. If we turn this way, we're going to keep them on the wrong side. It's a really subtle thing because you'll only see a little bit of it on the edge of the egg. But if we always turn to keep the yarns on the wrong side, it will keep the edges a little bit neater. For row 3, we're first going to chain 3 in the main colour and make 1 treble in the main colour in the same stitch, remembering to carry the yarn again that we're not using. We then want to change back to our contrast colour. And we want to make 2 trebles in our contrast colour in the next stitch. So an increase. And then 2 more trebles in this colour, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. And actually, as our checkerboard grows, you'll start to see a little bit more clearly where we need to change colour without necessarily always referring to the pattern. So we can see now we're moving into a square of our main colour, and we want to make 4 trebles in our main colour, working over the top of our contrast colour. Changing back to the contrast colour. We then want to work 2 trebles, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. We've got 2 stitches left of our row here, so we're going to work 2 trebles in our contrast colour into the next stitch. Changing colour on the last yarn over. And then finally, because we're matching what we did at the start of the row, we're now going to work 2 trebles in our main colour into that very last stitch. We're going to change colour on the last stitch of the row. Turn your work onto your wrong side. And for row 4, we're going to start with a chain 3 in our contrast colour. And then we're going to work 1 treble in our contrast colour into the next stitch. We're then going to change to our main colour. And actually we're not increasing or decreasing anymore now. We've got our correct number of stitches. So we just need to focus on changing colour and carrying the yarn. 4 treble in your contrast colour. Four treble in your main colour. And then 2 in your contrast colour, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches, or the last 2 stitches. Turn your work, and our next row is a direct repeat of what we've just done. Remembering to carry your yarn. Four in our main colour. Four in the contrast. And 4 in our main colour. before we're finally working 2 in our contrast colour. And on the very last yarn over of the last stitch, we're going to change to our main colour. So if we have a look at the previous 2 rows that we've worked, you can see here how we're starting to form these little squares with our 2 colours, switching always on the final yarn over of the colour and carrying the yarn that we're not currently using. So the next 2 rows of our checkerboard are the same as what we've done here, but we're just switching our colours again. So we're going to work 2 treble in our main colour, 4 in our contrast, 4 in our main, 4 in our contrast, and then 2 at the end, again in our main colour. So now we've got our yarn set up on the hook. I'm going to leave you here to work those 2 rows, and I'll join you back here for the row after that, row 8, where we're going to start decreasing. So I'll show you how we're going to manage our decreases whilst also changing colours and carrying our yarns. You join me back here on the very last stitch of row 7, where we're going to colour change from our main colour to our contrast colour. To begin row 8, we're going to start with a chain 1 in our contrast colour, which doesn't count here as a stitch because we're going to begin with a treble 2 together in our contrast colour. So as a reminder, we're going to yarn over first to begin our decrease stitch, and we do want to also be carrying our pink yarn here. So just make sure that it is sitting on your hook and next to your stitches when you begin this stitch. We're then going to yarn over and pull through 2 only. We're going to yarn over and go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 only. To complete our treble 2 together, we would then ordinarily yarn over and pull through all of the stitches. But because we want to colour change as well, we're going to make sure that we yarn over with our main colour and pull through all of the stitches to decrease. So we worked a treble 2 together in our contrast colour, and then we changed colour to our main colour. We now want to work 4 trebles in our main colour. Four treble in our contrast colour. Four treble in our main colour. And then to mirror what we did at the start of the row, across the last 2 stitches we want to decrease in the same way that we decreased across the first 2 stitches. And just like we did at the start, we'll also do a colour change at the end of it. So we're going to yarn over and go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. We're then going to yarn over and go into the final stitch, into the top of that chain. Which is sometimes easier said than done. Yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops only. And then at this stage we're going to complete the final yarn over and we're changing colour, so we're going to do it in our main colour. So at the end of that row we've decreased by 2 stitches. We're then going to turn our work and for the first 2 stitches we're going to make a decrease. So we're going to chain here, which doesn't count here as a stitch, And then we're going to make a decrease across these first 2 stitches. So we're going to be going into the opposite colour underneath, but that is correct, you are doing it right. Then we're going to go into our main colour, pulling through 2 loops only again. We're going to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. So that's a treble 2 together, then 3 trebles in our main colour, always carrying our yarn like we have for the rest of the egg. 4 treble in our contrast colour, then 3 treble in our main colour, and across the last 2 stitches we're going to make a treble 2 together using our main colour, but we are going to change colour on the last yarn over. So yarn over in your main colour and go into the first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and go into the final stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. We're then going to yarn over with our contrast colour and pull through all of those loops on our hook. Turn your work ready for the next row. And we're going to chain 1, which doesn't count here as a stitch. We then want to work 2 treble 2 togethers. So we're going to do all of these in our contrast colour, and we're going to remember to pick up and carry our yarn here. So yarning over, going into the first stitch, and then into the second. Yarn over to complete the stitch. Yarn over and make a treble 2 together across the next 2 stitches. And on the final yarn over, we're going to change colour. We then want to work 4 trebles in our main colour. And 2 treble 2 togethers in our contrast colour. And we don't need to change colour on that final stitch, on our final decrease. So we can keep the colour on our hook and complete the final yarn over. So for our final row, similarly to what we've done on other eggs, we're going to chain 1 here, which doesn't count as a stitch, and we're then going to work 4 treble 2 togethers across the row. So we're going to turn our 8 stitches into 4 stitches. We're going to work the first treble 2 together in our contrast colour, remembering to carry your yarn. We want to change colour here because we want our colours to stack nice and neatly. We're going to work 2 treble 2 together in our main colour. So that's 1 decrease. And a second one. We're going to want to change colour one last time on that second one. We've then got 1 more treble 2 together to work across our final 2 stitches. And we want to carry our yarn here to the edge, but we don't need to change colour. So we're going to complete the final yarn over in our contrast colour. You can then cut and fasten off both of your yarns, leaving a long enough tail end to weave in later. And on the colour that's still on our hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through all the way to slip stitch and fasten off. So on that last row, we decreased from 8 to 4 stitches. We did the first in our contrast colour, we then did 2 in our main colour, and then we did the final one in our contrast colour. So there you have it. That's how to work your checkerboard egg, how to carry your yarns, turn neatly, and change colour on the final yarn over of each stitch. So on the wrong side, you can see I've got a few little tail ends here where we turned our work, and then hopefully on the front we've got a little bit of a neater edge. We will be sewing this down onto our blanket, so if you've got a few little errant tail ends that are peeping out or that you can see, don't panic, we can hide those a little bit as we're sewing it on as well. Once you have finished your base and you've made all of your eggs, we're going to look together at how we will sew them on. So what I would recommend is placing out all of your eggs first. So you might want to do this on a table or a slightly larger workspace, and just check that you're happy with your placement. You can follow our guide and the way that we've placed our eggs by following the picture, or if you prefer, you can do your own arrangement, but definitely check them first, check you're happy and that you feel that everything is evenly spaced. Obviously, I'm working with a slightly smaller section here, but what I would recommend is either use some little stitch markers or you can use some safety pins to just secure them down. We're only going to be sewing around the outside, so we can pin them based on the arrangement when you're happy. So then if you do need to move or manipulate your work as you're sewing, you're not going to lose your arrangement, and then the eggs won't sort of bunch up when you're sewing them down as well. So I'll show you with this one. I would also recommend that you weave in your ends before we get to this stage. So the backs of our works, the wrong sides, will be hidden. But if you're planning on using your blanket as a blanket rather than just decorative, it's always good to weave in your ends rather than just hide them to stop them coming undone as your blanket is used and enjoyed. So to begin sewing them down, I've got this one pinned down and I've got a yarn needle. You're also going to want an arm's length of the main colour. So whichever main colour you've used to make the egg, get yourself an arm's length of the corresponding or matching yarn and thread your yarn needle. Now we're going to begin by securing our yarn on the underside of the egg. So to do this, you can tie a knot if you prefer, but I'm just going to sew a few times as if I was weaving in an end, catching the backs of the stitches, just to give us a nice secure base to work from. And then this isn't an exact science. We're going to bring our needle and yarn up to the front of our work. And like I said, I do recommend doing this on a table or certainly something where you're not going to catch your needle on anything underneath as you push it through. It is quite handy to do it on a flat surface. So I'm going to take my needle essentially up and down through both layers of the egg and the base to secure it all together. And we are going to sew straight down and then come back up again. We're going to do that approximately every sort of 2 or 3 stitches or 2 or 3 rows apart. It doesn't need to be super close together. But just to secure everything down nicely. When you get to sections like this, you can aim to either go down and up first underneath the work, catching an edge that's the same colour, and then go back down and up again underneath. If you start to notice that your work is puckering or pulling, it's probably just that you're pulling your sewing stitches tightly. So you will see these stitches a little bit on the reverse, but it'll just be, by the end of it, a little running stitch in an egg shape. Once you've gone all the way around your egg, all of the edges will be sewn down. So, skipping ahead of myself, imagining I'm at that stage, in order to weave in your end, your final end, rather than weaving it in here and it being visible, you can manipulate it so that you're weaving it in by taking it underneath the work and then just catching the backs of the stitches there with your yarn needle. To weave it in, I'd say go back and forth 2 or 3 times. Once you've gone all the way around, you can then cut your yarn close to the egg with your scissors. And we just need to repeat that for all of our eggs. Obviously, you can remove your stitch markers or your safety pins once each egg is sewn on. So there you have it. That's how to attach your eggs. Go ahead and attach all of the ones. It's actually a really lovely part to do because once we've got these colourful eggs all over our blanket, it really brings such colour and vibrancy to where we've got to in week 3. And it's much easier to do it at this stage as well. Before our blanket grows any bigger, we can get to the edge of our work and manipulate the fabric much more easily. So I've shown you there for week 3 how to work the 2 new styles of eggs and finish off our base. I would love to know if you enjoyed making the bows as much as I did. I feel like they are just a really fun little cute pop of colour on those eggs and the checkerboard one as well. I will see you back here next week for week 4, and I hope you all have an excellent week working on your blankets.